Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm Janet Green, the Executive Director here at Ecumen Community here in Detroit Lakes, formerly known as Emmanuel Nursing Home, so I'm glad you all found it. I will offer tours of our new construction and some of our new things after the event today if anyone is interested, so I'll kind of be standing at the back. We're really pleased to have this conference room, the Forest Conference Center, and we allow nonprofit groups to use it free of charge. So if any of you need a space and think this would work for you, be sure to let us know. We just love having the community come in, and the people that live here really enjoy seeing new faces and being a part of the community. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Deanna Sinclair.
Good afternoon. Right now I'm going to introduce Pastor Brenda North, and she's going to give a history of the DL Human Trafficking Working Group.
Thank you. I just would do a little bit about what brought us here to this moment today. And as I read this, it just dawns on me, if I say an organization that you are a part of, will you just lift your hand up and we'll get a sense in the room of some of the community partners that are represented here today. The Detroit Lakes Human Trafficking Working Group was created in the spring of 2014 by Reverend Georgia Heacock of St. Luke's Episcopal Church and Reverend Mark Keeter from the Congregational United Church of Christ, and myself from the United Methodist Church. Noting common concerns and areas of emphasis, the Detroit Lakes Area League of Women Voters quickly got involved, and the Lakes Crisis Resource Center soon became a part of this group as well. The group's purpose is to shed light on the very real danger to our community's young people who are frequently targeted and become victims of this crime. The Detroit Lakes Working Group recently received the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition, that is a mouthful, a Social Justice Award for their efforts. The Minnesota League of Women Voters has done extensive study on sex trafficking and in 2014 adopted a national position on this issue. This event is the second in an ongoing series of events intended to create greater community awareness to this very real issue. The first event was in October of 2014 when the Blank Slate Theater performed a play called Bottom. How many of you were able to attend that event? So we have many new faces here too, and just welcome to you all, thank you. And we hope that through this, we can highlight the issue of sex trafficking of our young and vulnerable people. And all interested organizations and individuals are invited to join and can learn more by contacting any of the organizations that we named here today. So Deanna, back to you.
Thank you. As part of the League of Women Voters, I'm going to read a statement on the position of human trafficking that was adopted at the League of Women Voters United States National Convention last year. The League of Women Voters opposes all forms of domestic and international human trafficking of adults and children, including sex trafficking and labor trafficking. We consider human trafficking to be a form of modern-day slavery and believe that every measure should be taken and every effort should be made through legislation and changes in public policy to prevent human trafficking. Prosecution and penalization of traffickers and abusers should be established, and existing laws should be strictly enforced. Extensive essential services for victims should be applied where needed. Education and awareness programs on human trafficking should be established in our communities and in our schools. At this time, I would like to introduce Kevin Wallevand. Kevin Wallevand has been a reporter at WDAY-TV since 1983. He is a native of Vining, Minnesota in Otter Tail County. His series and documentary work have brought him to Africa, Vietnam, Haiti, Kosovo, South America, Mongolia, and the Middle East. He continues to travel on his vacation time to Haiti each year with a surgical team. He is an Emmy and an Edward R. Murrow Award recipient. So please welcome Kevin Wallevand.
I usually pay people not to go on the website and print that bio. But anyway, here we are. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. to come to this. And I'm really energized by what I'm seeing here just in our region in the last couple of months. And, you know, it's really no surprise that we have more women here today because they are the ones that are really driving this. And I have talks on this topic scheduled in the coming weeks and months, and a lot of them are driven by women who are involved in their church, and that the ELCA, for example, is taking on trafficking as a world issue. But it's also funneling down then to church groups nationwide, but then, you know, focused locally and regionally. So I just think that's fantastic. And it says a lot about the issue, and it says a lot about where we live in that, hey, this is something that needs to be addressed. And whether it's from a legislative standpoint or just getting the awareness out there, because, you know, it's one thing for a lawmaker to say something about we need to do something about sex trafficking, but then you withhold funding from the groups that are designed to really focus on working with women who are victims or trying to stop the sex trafficking. So I think the more people that get aware of it and they contact lawmakers, and it's not all about writing new laws, believe me, but, you know, having you folks with the eyes and the ears then to let people know what you're seeing and hearing out there. We first got involved in this trafficked issue about a little over a year ago. And the Forum, which owns WDOI as part of Forum Communications, said we're thinking about doing something on sex trafficking in the oil patch. And my initial reaction was, man, sounds like a really, really broad topic. How are we going to make that interesting? How are we going to make a half hour on this interesting? I'd been out there in the oil patch several times, and I kind of knew of this issue and knew it was going on. But, you know, quite honestly, to make a story work, you need people who are willing to share their story. You know, if you're going to do a story on sex trafficking, and the only people you talk to are, you know, the attorney general and a cop and, you know, a pastor, you don't have much. But boy, we got some unbelievable people that were willing to share their story and to step out and share their story. And because they did that, it's really just opened up the gates for this issue. We had close to 300 people at the Fargo Theater here a couple of weeks ago, including you know, Bishop of the Catholic Church and half of the entire Fargo police force. So people know this is going on and they want to do something about it. So that tells me this is good, and there's this good grassroots groundswell of education and awareness and hopefully making some changes. So the documentary runs about 27 minutes, so if you need to adjust your chair or your seat so that you can get a good view, we'll take a peek. Kevin, thanks for your help on the audio video since I'm clueless on it.
Here in Williston, North Dakota, winter is starting to freeze out autumn, but records continue to be shattered. A labor force that's quadrupled the last 5 years. And here in the Bakken, 1 million barrels of oil a day coming out of the patch. But with that, darkness. Crime is up 120% here in Williston. And in the oil patch, a dirty little secret called sex trafficking. Tonight, the faces of the victims, the survivors, and what North Dakota is doing to save them. Coming up, Trafficked. And the Bakken's secrets are lost out here in the Wild West.
Thank you. One thing we've seen here in just the last weeks following the documentary is, there needs to be more concerted effort to get help for the victims early on, like we have in Minnesota with Safe Harbor. 2 weeks ago, a woman was arrested for trafficking a teenage girl out in the oil patch, and she was arrested and jailed, but the victim, there just wasn't the support services for that victim. So that victim has since fled. So look at what happens then. How do you prosecute when you don't have the victim? You follow me? So there needs to be this a better effort to get those services like we have in Minnesota, where they're addressed in some cases that night with the Navigator program, where they get help for the victim immediately and funnel them into resources that are available, like what we have even here in town, here in DL, with the shelter and things like that. But having said that, that's kind of a crazy balance there too, because you can't put the victims of sex trafficking and house them with victims of domestic abuse, because there's just different issues going on. And so that's something that will come up a little later. Well, there's a lot more brighter, smarter, better looking people than me to talk here, so let's get them up here as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming today. We wanted to also bring a couple of important people that work on this issue in our region to come and speak just for a few minutes about some of the work that they do. As Kevin said, it's very important that we have resources and that people know where those resources are so that they can get the help that they need if they are looking to get out of the sex trafficking industry. Two of the people that we'd like to speak for just a few minutes are Bailey Weathern and Ashley Zern. Bailey Weathern is a Safe Harbor Regional Navigator for the northwest part of Minnesota. She's been in the position since August of 2014 at Support Within Reach, based in Bemidji, Minnesota. She has experience with working with youth for 4 years, since graduating with a bachelor's in social work from Bemidji State University. Ashley will be speaking after her, and she is a representative of the DOVE program, the DOVE program is one of the regional sites for Native American women in the state of Minnesota.
Hey everybody, it's really great to be here, and I actually have not seen this documentary before, so it was really great to come and see more than just clips of it, see the whole version. And also, it was kind of a loop for my job of, I just got to meet Danielle John for the first time on Thursday, so that was just really cool connection for it all to be happening within the same few days. At my position with Support Within Reach is a sexual violence resource center based in Bemidji, Minnesota, but I am in charge of the Northwest region, which is 21 counties, going up to Lake of the Woods, Roseau area, and far as down to like the Little Falls, Morrison County, everything in between. The Safe Harbor law, how many of you have heard about the legislation that passed in Minnesota? Okay. So the Safe Harbor law decriminalizes youth in Minnesota for sexual exploitation, and that includes a continuum of things, so not just sex trafficking, Right now, Minnesota only has that legislation for the youth in our community, does not yet decriminalize adults. So definitely something we're still advocating for and working towards to get services and more awareness for that as well, because we have so many people coming forward when they're mid-20s, even into their 30s, coming forward and telling us stories of how this has been happening since they were 13, 14 years old. The average entry into prostitution is between 12 and 14 years old. So kind of what that continuum looks like of what commercial sexual exploitation is. I say sexual exploitation of youth a lot. All kind of are leading up to trafficking. And the scenario we think about, which we've seen of like the pimp, the John, so the customer, and then the victim. And so I also work with youth who are being exploited by just the victim and the John. So a lot of times we see that as sex for drugs. Sometimes we see that as sexual exchange for a ride somewhere. We see it a lot with homeless youth that are couch hopping from one place to another, so a lot of survival sex. So Safe Harbor is not just created for trafficking, it's also created for that continuum of services. And we're also able to work with at-risk youth, which looks very different. A lot of those signs look like youth running away from group homes, like 3 or more incidences of running away, past child sexual abuse, a lot of internet safety concerns. So if they're on dating websites, if we're seeing different things on Chit Chat, Backpage, or any other ads posted that way, it doesn't need to be an ad, an explicit picture, or however they are reaching out for that, I want to say, reaching out for that customer, but attention or whatever they're getting out of it for their own self-esteem, or whatever they think they're getting in a relationship through brainwashing and through that grooming process. Because a lot of the times these girls, these victims are identifying that this is their boyfriend, someone they love, someone who's taking care of them. So that's really important to remember. I think it's also really important to remember that trafficking isn't always a movement. So I think here we've talked a lot about the Bakken area and how girls are making it out into the Bakken area. And not that that's not important, because northern Minnesota has a lot of movement between Duluth and North Dakota, and we definitely have a well-known track. But a lot of the cases I'm working on is happening in small communities with families. So it's happening where we don't want to connect it, but the mom is the pimp, the dad is the pimp. So we're seeing a lot of stories of mom exchanging children for rent, or drugs a lot of the time, or, and I mean, there's so many numerous different situations that could be happening within the family. But that just goes into really the normalcy that this is creating for the youth and for the survivors, and really the brainwashing that's occurring as well, and how much you have to dive into discussing in the therapy that goes into them even identifying that they are victims of sexual exploitation and trafficking, because 90% of cases they're not identifying as that victim. I think that also, just to, where is this? I think that part of grooming is that thinking about that continuum of sexual abuse is that 90% of youth who have ended up in this track have been sexually abused as a youth. So looking at those risk factors and finding a way to prevent this from happening is what Safe Harbor is also working towards. So the Safe Harbor law did that, but the No Wrong Door protocol went along with it and put me and then 8 other regional navigators in place. So regional navigators are in charge of ongoing and educating providers, law enforcement, social services, county attorneys, community members, whoever it may be that's looking for more information to help. We also do outreach to youth, so I've gone to several different youth facilities and just talked about the topic and make sure they know I'm comfortable, and definitely putting it in their terms, talking about social media, talking about Grand Theft Auto, talking about all the different social norms that our society is bringing out. And then I also provide ongoing case management in my 6-county area. Right now, that's what I'm doing, and hopefully we'll be working with sexual assault programs to have them all on the same page in our region, to be working with survivors in the same manner. And I'm just here as an expert in the region to be consulting and working through cases. And then in several different communities, we have working groups like you guys have here, which is really great, helping with community education, awareness, and protocol development. I think a lot of the times we need to be thinking about the special considerations when working with this population, is a lot of the times going unidentified and misidentified when they're already in our system. And so the no wrong door model is supposed to be creating a system that no matter where these youth are, they're being identified and they're getting the correct services for that. So, yes, thank you so much again. And I think that's all I have, unless are we doing questions at the end? Yep.
Hello everybody, I'm Ashley Zern and I work with the White Earth Dove program. I'm sorry my voice is a little hoarse today. I am the Tribal Safe Harbor Navigator for the 3 tribes in the northern region, which is White Earth, Leech Lake, and Red Lake reservations. So I work with the tribal communities. They felt that, the state felt that there was a little more need in tribal communities for a navigator to provide services. They see a little more of this going on in those communities. So that is what I do, the same as Bailey does. But working with the Dove program, we provide a lot of direct services to victim survivors. We do transportation for them. If anybody needs like transportation to any kind of appointment, we do relocation. We find places for them to go. We have a shelter in White Earth that houses any ethnicity there is. I know that Detroit Lakes, also Lakes Crisis, has a shelter here. The only thing with that is that both of those shelters in our area only house victim survivors over the age of 18. I work with a lot of youth, so finding other avenues for them to go is a struggle sometimes, but also what we are experts in, so we can find them somewhere to go, not always locally, but maybe somewhere else. We have all kinds of services there. We help with legal services, finding lawyers, taking them to legal appointments, finding people that are experts in this area to help them. We also have advocates that are on staff 24/7, so we have a crisis line for trafficking, also with sexual assault, domestic violence, elder abuse. We work with that too. We give, help with food if they need food or clothing or just basic necessities, shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, anything. And we also work with the no wrong door model there. So if it's something that can help them for now, like finding them a place to stay for the night, we will do that too. We do safe housing, pretty much anything that you can think of, that is what we do at Dove. So if anybody ever has a need that you think we could service them, the best thing to do is to call us, and we are staffed 24/7. So if the people that are there don't know, they will find out. They'll give us a call. But if you see a youth that's being trafficked, they'll call our crisis line, and then they will get a hold of me personally to work with that person, and I'll do direct services with them and also referrals and things like that to any services that they may need that we don't have right at our facility. I think that's probably about it. And then I think we're going to do questions now for us.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to have Bailey and Kevin maybe come back up front. We're going to have questions from the audience. And if you're going to ask a question, you can line up here at the microphone. And please stick to one single topic for your question, and we'll have 2-minute responses that they can help with. We also have Kathy Wynn from the Becker County Sheriff's Department here, so if there's something that might apply to more law enforcement, she might be able to help us with that. And we've got representatives from some other organizations that are going to be out in the hallway afterwards. I would also like to thank Kevin Mitchell. He's our technology guru in the back. He's been recording this, and this presentation is going to be on YouTube. And there will also be a link where you can watch the trafficked video right from the WDAY site as well. I would also like to thank Sanford for their monetary donation. They helped us with marketing for this event, and we're really grateful for their contribution. And we would like to continue the work of the DL Working Group for Human Trafficking in the future and have more events like this for awareness and prevention. If you choose to donate to the group, we've got a basket here that's going to go around for a free will offering. If you choose to write a check, you can write it to St. Luke's Episcopal Church, and it would be a tax-deductible donation. We've got a fund set up over there for that, or you can talk to some of us afterwards out in the entryway. So at this time, if anybody has any questions, I invite you to step forward.
While we're waiting, I want to thank Renee for coming. Renee was from Vanished Inc. She's here today. She's the one that, free of charge, is working with Danielle on that tattoo. Thank you.
Hi.
Come on up.
This one here? Yeah. My name is Misty, and I work with a couple different youth ministries in our area. My question for you is, as leaders and as mothers and fathers and parents that are getting uniting together around these youth, how can we identify who is the victim? Some of us can hide things very well. How can we identify that?
These guys are the experts, but let me just fill you in on what we heard at the Fargo Theater the other night. And there was a pretty strong belief that the schools really need to get involved in this, in addition to churches. But from everything that we were able to see, including some of the young women in our documentary, these girls are coming from troubled backgrounds where there's not a lot of stability in their life, and sometimes been kicked out of the house. Their parent is addicted possibly, and they might be pregnant, so it just gets to be this snowball effect. So obviously if you can find these kids early on in this situation and get to them, my guess is you'll help out the situation, but I'll let the experts touch on that.
Oh, thank you so much. Okay. I'd say that I go off what Kevin is saying. It's really hard to say. There's so many different ways for these youth to be at risk for sexual exploitation, and not just sexual exploitation, sex trafficking. I think that there's a lot of common identifiers of those risk factors, like I was saying, past sexual abuse, that normalcy. I would say running away from group homes, being homeless, having those identifiers of them really being around older men, seeing that abuse and that just not being able to take care of their basic needs. It's really getting into those conversations. They're not going, I think the important thing is that we're putting it back into their language, because they're not going to come up and obviously say, hey, I'm being trafficked, hey, I'm being exploited. It's not going to go that way. Probably never. And if it does, I would be amazed. And so working through that process is different for every youth, and it's really hard to because those common indicators definitely go for domestic violence, they go for sexual violence. And so I think it's being comfortable enough to go into those details and say, hey, where are you getting money? Or who is taking care of you? Or just really getting into the discussion and trying to identify the power situation that might be at play. And by identifying the relationship that's happening really helps you to understand how it might be occurring. So it can look very different. For example, finding explicit pictures in a school, a lot of times are being asked to come in and talk at schools for sexting. And so sexting itself is an exploitation, but as soon as the picture is forwarded on for a higher social status or there's some sort of exchange happening that way, then the youth is being exploited, which we're seeing a lot of the time. Their drug use, how are they getting drugs? Homeless, who are they staying with? What's being expected of them?
And I just want to add one thing. I covered a trial here a month ago in Clay County involving a sex trafficker, and the prosecuting attorney was asking the victim questions. She didn't even know her trafficker's name. And he was the one driving her from Minneapolis up to Moorhead to be trafficked and got the hotel room, etc. She didn't know who he was. And not only that, but the traffickers, they're slick. They know what they're doing. They use prepaid credit cards, so there's no trail. They use throwaway cell phones so there's no trail. And usually there's a second person then who will get nailed initially on this, because there's no way of nailing that trafficker. There's usually a second person in between the victim and the trafficker that is facilitating some of this, and oftentimes then they'll take the fall for the trafficker, because the cops can't find any way of nailing that trafficker, because they've gotten smart about leaving no paper trail at all. So I'm sorry.
I do also have a specific handout out at my table on victim identification, so if you want to see that, I have that out there.
Thank you all for being here. I'm Cherry Khalil with the League of Women Voters, and I'd just like to point out that we've talked a lot about women who are victims of trafficking. I think it's important to note, and maybe you all can talk about the experience of young boys, teenage boys, and have any of the service providers here who do the counseling, who work on the front lines, are you starting to see more of that with young men?
I personally have not worked with any young males, but I do believe it is happening. I think probably more of exploitation when they don't have a place to stay, someone exploiting them for, a place to stay at night or, basic needs, things like that. I would say the best thing to do is if you see anybody with risk factors to just give myself or Bailey a call. It's really big on building a relationship with them to get them to even want to work with us. So if they have those risk factors, even if they are not yet being trafficked or exploited, it can happen very quickly. And so to give us a call so we can build those relationships and maybe get them the things that they do need before it goes to the next level.
I can just speak to a few experiences I've had. Most of my experiences have been with girls. But for example, one recent case goes back to a family. And so the mother and father, the family was trading their children for a place to stay. And in some communities, it is specifically known that younger boys are the preference. And there's also a lot of, in these areas, landlords that are pinpointing people just getting out of jail or whatever situation they were in, or if they're homeless and needing assistance. I've seen boys used in that way a lot of the time. I would also say pornography. So a lot of pornography and exploitation is happening that way as well with boys that I see. I think also the LGBTQ community, specifically for males, is being hit pretty hard because there's a lot of exchange happening for hormones as well. So instead of exchanging for, heroin, meth, marijuana, they're exchanging for street hormones to be going through that transition. So those are kind of some of the areas that I've seen, but I think the most common one would be the grooming that's happening with homeless youth. So a lot of youth on the streets being groomed by Johns or exploiters of some sort, approaching them and offering them food, offering them a place to stay, and really being able to identify those very vulnerable youth in the community.
Let me just ask a quick follow-up. Are the programs and the laws that you all have talked about, are they available for boys as well?
Absolutely. Okay. Safe Harbor, No Wrong Door only provides decriminalization for youth under the age of 17. So it's not yet for adults. But in our 6-county area, and I believe for your program as well, we serve both female and male adults. So those services are in place, but the laws around that for prostitution are still in place for women and males that are adults.
Hello, thank you all for being here, and thank you for attending so we can get the word out here. I'm Delray Chivers, and I'm too here from the League of Women Voters. Regarding our law enforcement here, who's here today, thank you for being here. I guess I'd like to know what kind of activity does our law enforcement see here in our direct area, and then my follow-up question is, how are the agencies connected with the law enforcement, and how does everyone speak to everyone to work on this issue?
I think what we're seeing mainly is not the commercial stuff as in the video that you saw, but I see a lot of stuff, drug-related stuff with kids, places to stay, rides, that kind of stuff is what we're seeing. And a lot of times it's not being reported as what it really is. It really is sex trafficking, but I don't know if we didn't want to see it that way or the community didn't want to see it that way, but that's what it is, and we have been getting reports on that. And we are actually working with the DOVE program, the Lakes Crisis Center, and the Safe Harbor programs, and we're trying to get ourselves informed because we have a lot of runaway reports. And I know I personally have been sitting down when we get the runaways back, we find them, and I've been talking to them and say, what's going on here? Why are you running away? What's been happening? And a lot of times I think we didn't ask that in the past because we didn't want to know what was going on. But I think now we need to know what's going on, so we are asking those questions now.
I just want to touch on, as part of the documentary, we hit a lot of these conferences around North Dakota, South Dakota, where the feds and the state of North Dakota then were joining with the local law enforcement, and then all of the different groups, like what we see here, and along with social workers and pastors and nurses and doctors, so that they're all on the same page. And I think that's key to all this, because everyone was kind of treading water for a few months, thinking everyone else was handling it, and they weren't. So it took this kind of a joint effort so that the Department of Justice sent out more FBI folks, and the state of North Dakota got involved with more BCI stings. And then it was to try to get the locals on board too. And to be honest, that's been the toughest, because they just don't have the people, and they don't have the time, because frankly, they're responding to so many other incidents and calls in their city that it becomes, we're going to have to let the state and the feds take care of it. Even though they are going through the training and everything, I just think a lot of these smaller departments just don't have the people power and the training to dive into this. So, and it's such a different ball game. The old days, cops would go up and down the street, right, looking for wrongdoing going out in the street. You don't have people walking up to cars anymore. It's all done with this. And in matter of a second, someone has lined up something, and that's what we saw out there. You saw that on the story. 11 o'clock on a Thursday morning, there's 28, ventures going on, people trying to connect. That's on a Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. There's just so many men out there with so much money and so much time, and that's the result.
Follow up on that, just with the training. What kind of awareness training is out there for at least, okay, here are some signs. If you see these signs, this is what we need to do. What kind of training's out there?
I know that we have a training coming up in Bemidji at the Sanford Center. Dove is paired with Lakes Crisis Center, and it's for all disciplines. So law enforcement, healthcare, advocacy, any discipline that is going to see these youth, which is going to be everywhere. Yeah, child protection is going to be there, and it is going to touch on all topics. It's going to have stuff about trafficking, exploitation, sexual abuse, child abuse, domestic violence. So that is coming up May 5th and 6th. There are some brochures for that out there, but I know they're going to have Grant Snyder come in and speak, and he is a keynote and also doing 2 breakout sessions. He's an investigator from Minneapolis that works specifically with sex trafficking, and he is a great speaker. They also have someone from Breaking Free, which is an organization in the cities that works with sex trafficking victims, and she's going to speak. It's going to be a really good, well-rounded training for anybody to attend if they want to. And then I think Bailey has one coming up as well.
I also have a conference coming up. Each navigator in our region is in charge of holding one for our area. So in 21 counties, all disciplinaries will be invited. So school providers, law enforcement, social services, the medical model, there's so many, I could go on and on. So anyone working with at-risk youth population. It's going to be on June 11th and 12th. It's a day-and-a-half conference, and we're using statewide experts from our area, but we will also be harboring our own regional champions, is what we call it. So a lot of people that have more expertise, so a law enforcement officer in the Moorhead area, for example, and the Grand Forks area will be coming and saying how they're seeing this happen, more specific to our region. And we will also be having more information on how it's more likely to happen in rural Minnesota than having a model coming from the metro area that doesn't suit us as well. Also on top of that, my role and Ashley's role as navigator is to be going out and doing presentations with any department that's requesting us, and we're supposed to be doing that outreach as well. So I've gone into several law enforcement agencies and have not had the opportunity to be in with Becker. It just recently became my county, and regional navigator just left, so I'm not sure if they've come into law enforcement directly, but that will definitely be something to continue doing education that way. The Ramsey County Attorney's Office is in charge of doing law enforcement and prosecution, and they'll have a training this coming August or September for them as well, specifically on investigations.
And I just wanted to let everyone know that myself will be attending that training in Bemidji, and also our sheriff, Todd Glander, will also be attending that. So just so the public's aware that we are taking this seriously and we're working with the disciplines here. Thank you.
Hi, Mitch Wimmer from Detroit Lakes. A quick question is, are you doing a lot of education, or what's going on with the younger kids? The kids that maybe aren't in this type of activity yet but are vulnerable, and I should have brought my grandkids here so that they could have listened to this, so that's my question.
I know myself and the sexual assault advocate that work at Dove, we have been doing a lot of community outreach. I was just at the week of the young child, an event that was held at the casino last week. We hold booths, we give away things, talk to the kids. We have some, I guess you could say, disturbing. They're cartoon characters, and in some of them there is exploitation, molestation, you know, like Jasmine, the princess on Aladdin, kissing her dad. So it brings up a lot of good conversation that we can have with the kids, you know, what do you see? And they're, you know, if they're like, oh, it's gross, you know, then we can kind of go into that. Well, why do you think that? Yeah, that's, you know, probably not right. And talk to them. We're working on getting together kind of a presentation that we can go into the schools with, and different ones to focus on different age groups that's specific to the, you know, we'll hit the young area and then work our way up into the teens and stuff, since we are seeing kids that are, you know, being entered into this kind of stuff at 12 to 14 years is the average age of entry. So to get to those young kids as soon as possible, to kind of let them know, like, this is not right. These are, you know, some signs of people, if they're talking to you like this, trying to coerce you into things like this, things for them to be aware of. That's what we've been working on in our community. We try and hit like the parades, things like that, where they can see our faces and get to know us and know who we are and want to talk to us and things like that.
And I agree with all of that. I can't speak to anything I've done specifically in the Becker County area other than the community events of coming here. But definitely, like I said before, going in and talking to the schools. So I've definitely been working on getting presentations in, for example, in health class to talk about internet safety, talk about the risk factors. And I think also being here and really engaging parents is important as well, to make sure you're having these conversations with your kid. I think a lot of the times we don't want to think that this is happening to our children, and I think that's fair. Who wants to believe it's going to happen? But it's likely that your children will have a friend. It's likely that it's happening in your community and your children have experiences with these risk factors. So just really having that conversation within your own family as well, we really encourage.
I guess this question for each one I'd like to hear thoughts on, but to fight this, obviously, it takes a lot more people than the people in this room. So if we could be advocates in the community, it's always a big thing. If you could give us a clear direction on if there was one wish we could grant for you in the Becker County Lakes area, if you had one wish granted, what would you want it to be?
Well, one thing that came up the other night was there are some really good videos and just recently produced, well-produced videos about sex trafficking and almost kind of more of a movie type thing. And everything I hear from those who are trying to fight sex trafficking, they said if every kid and every parent can watch this video, it would get the word out there. So you'd educate and you'd make people aware. And I can certainly get that, name of that, because I think a lot of churches would jump at the chance to show this. I know some groups have tried to get it into the schools and have kind of been met with a little, I'm not sure we can show that type of thing, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But I think if there's a groundswell of you need to show this, I think it'll happen. But definitely churches, and then you invite all kinds of kids. I think that's my just little nugget right there. You know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think my one wish would be to listen to the kids. Like, that is huge. I know in a lot of things, these children are looked at as they're misbehaving, they don't listen, they are, combative with law enforcement, but usually there is something behind that. And to just have a conversation with them, maybe get to know them, make that connection. And I guess in that, I would hope that, once they get a good, healthy relationship, they will disclose maybe, to someone, and that will start to stop the cycle. But a lot of people just look at them as they're bad kids, like they don't take the time to sit down and talk to them and see what's really going on behind the surface.
Which videos? Chosen is the video, or is there a My Life, My Choice curriculum too? Okay. This is a really hard question for me. I have so many different roles. I have a hard time picking one of them to focus on, but my initial instinct is to just echo what Ashley is saying. We're here for the youth. We need to be providing the services for the youth. And ultimately in northern Minnesota, not just in Becker County, but as a whole, we don't have housing resources. We don't have transportation resources. We have few. And that is really, really hard. That's a gap in our area. So if I could have one grant of anything, I think just more specific services in our area, but also on a more feasible level, getting the right people in a room, child protection, law enforcement, school providers, any community members that have really been for this, and coming up with not only an education plan, but a protocol plan in place to reach these youth that are going misidentified and unidentified because we're not asking the right questions or we're not comfortable enough with this discussion yet. I really want it to be something that there are people in this community, which there already are on a community level, but that are specifically trained to work with the youth because they need to be identifying as victims in order for us to be providing those resources.
My wish would be that no kids would have to go through this at all, but that's not going to be a reality. So I would just encourage anybody that has a situation where they think a kid's being exploited to report it. And we can't change what happens, but we can try to fix it and make it right. So that's what I would encourage you to do, is just report stuff to us. Thank you.
Can I ask one more question? Or are you going to ask a question? It's a quick one. As we're helping those that have been through sex trafficking recover, are the workforce centers in our region working with them to help them get employment and to get out of that cycle and to meet some of their needs?
That would be definitely on the list of things that we need to do. But training them will be, something that we want to do. But it's also a resource that we look for when trying to help the youth. We try and find the best thing suited for them. So working with, the workforce centers and things like that to find them a job, to make them self-sufficient is definitely something that we utilize and work with them.
Well, I'm the chair of the local 19 County Workforce Board, so I will help make that happen.
Great.
Awesome.
All right, at this time, I'd like Leona Ulrich from the Lakes Crisis Center, Lakes Crisis and Resource Center to come up. She's going to talk about some of the resources that are available from several different agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry I neglected to say who I was earlier. My name is Leona, and I'm the Program Director for Crime Victim Services at the Lakes Crisis and Resource Center. And as Deanna explained, we are one of the primary resources in Becker County for crime victims, including sex trafficking. I wanted to let you know there was a question. I think one of the first questions actually was, how do you recognize something like sex trafficking? And we happen to have quite a bit of material out on the tables out front, so help yourself to some of the information that's out there. One of them actually is called a profile of a sex trafficking victim, and it does give you a little better idea what kinds of situations are happening for young people as they are brought into the issue of human trafficking. There's also some facts about sex trafficking on the back. And then how to recognize some of the early stages of sex trafficking. We will also post this on our website, lakescrisis.com, if you are looking for more information about any of this. Please know that we also have a 24-hour crisis line. We are always there to help and to answer questions and to provide resources to you. I believe Ashley mentioned one of the trainings locally particularly for professionals, and there are quite a few copies that Ashley brought. The Lakes Crisis Center is co-hosting the event, and if you page through, you can see a lot of very specific programming that is designed to educate community providers about the issue of sex trafficking. So please take a look at that, and if you're able to join us, it is in Bemidji. It is on May 5th and May 6th. Also, I did put a sign-up sheet because I only brought so many copies, and we have a very nice large crowd today. So if you are not able to get copies, feel free to look at our website or write your name down, and we'll be happy to get a hold of you and provide more information to you if you'd like. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the Crisis Center is it just so happens that the month of April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And this whole event, when I first began talking with some of the women from the work group, the human trafficking work group, I jumped at the chance to be able to be a part of this. We work so hard all year round, but particularly in April, to bring awareness to issues like sexual violence. And as it was brought up, there are many different ways to be involved in the industry of sex trafficking. Sometimes it is gang-related. Sometimes it happens within a family, when a family is trying to meet their basic needs and they're seeking out whatever revenue they can in order to meet those needs. There's lots of different ways that this whole industry can become a part of a family's life. One of the programs that we have at the Crisis Center that I also wanted to mention is the kinship program. Because of the fact that there are a lot of young youth in our community that are at risk, they are really, really looking for healthy role models. And this would be a wonderful opportunity for any of you who would like to reach out and support some of these young people who are really struggling at home, in relationships, with all kinds of different issues in their life. This is a wonderful way to support them and to hopefully support the work we do at the Crisis Center as well. We also, one last thing, the League of Women Voters was kind enough, after the first event, the Blank Slate Theater play that was introduced back in August of last year, there was a free will donation, and part of the proceeds from that free will donation was used by the League of Women Voters and the group to purchase a couple of videos for the Crisis Center for us to use in our awareness campaign. So we have one video that talks a lot more about the larger issue of human trafficking, including labor trafficking, because that's a big part of where youth are exploited as well, and women. And then another one is about an hour-long video. I want to say it was the movie, or what it is, the video chosen, but I could be wrong. At any rate, another wonderful video. If you'd like to see it, let us know. We'll make it available to you. It talks a lot about the sex trafficking industry, and it's important to really try to understand what this industry is all about. The last video that we were given is specifically used in our support groups with youth. I think it was mentioned earlier that youth need to talk about this issue. They need to recognize that they are very vulnerable, and they need to be educated about how easy it can be to get drawn into this kind of industry. So thank you for your time. We have lots of information out at the front desk, and some of us will be available for questions as well. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to step up to the mic. I think Janet was going to come up. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes the formal program, and I love it because I love when meetings get done early. But that gives us more opportunity to visit out in the lobby here with the different people that have been presenting. They've got a lot of information. We brought in some fresh coffees and filled up the cookie plate. So please stay and visit and continue the learning process here. On behalf of all of us from League of Women Voters and here at Ecumen, thank you for coming. Thank you for caring. Thank you for those of you that work and help the victims and are a part of the solution. It was really an honor to be here today and learn about this. I'm sure you're probably feeling like I am, that it's a way bigger problem than I think some of us really realize. So thank you, and please enjoy. Oh, and thank you. The donations looked very generous. I was really moved by the donations, so thank you. It's a good number, you guys. We raised $333. And I know the Ministerial Association will put it to good use to help bring me more resources and more programs like this so we can all learn.